Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. We're going to get started pretty much right away. Hopefully, a lot of you get information you need during this live, or you at least get to ask your questions because I'm sitting here. I'm here. I have the day off from work. So I'm here to share all the information with you and answer your questions, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get started. People will be able to pop in and out. I don't have a set duration for this. I definitely won't go over an hour. But if you have any questions at all, go ahead and drop them in the chat box and I'll be sure to respond. If it's something that I need to look into before I respond, I will absolutely let you know that as well. So, we're here because you're interested in HR, right? You've received some information, you've met someone, maybe it's me who's got you interested in the field. And so now you're sort of considering whether or not you want to make a move or look into it or not, right? This is a super informal session. I don't even want to call it a session, it's more like a discussion. I'm just here to give you all the tea that I can on the topic. The first thing that I knew I wanted to start off with was the fact that I realized a couple years ago that people have been lying to me for years, right? Managers, employers, they lie to you and say you should just be grateful to have a job, which, yes, we should. We should be grateful to have jobs. But people who are making 500 plus a year will come and tell you that 50K is okay, 60K is okay, it's average, you don't need more than that. I'm here to tell you can make a lot more than that by working in HR. I did it, and I've kind of tried to share my story with a lot of people like you so that you can have a real life example of how you can shift and pivot and earn more and not be made to feel guilty about that. So, oh, we got a question here. So you're riding the fence between HR and data analysis. Any advice or feedback? They want you to have 1 to 3 years experience. So that's a good questioning. And I actually have both of those or that topic, that position on my list as one that I wanted to talk about, that data analysis. That is a good one. You can do data in HR though. So I'm going to come back to that question because I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So, it's sort of back to what I was just saying is just like you can make good money working in HR. You can make great money working in HR, especially that data analysis piece. You can absolutely make great money because what those positions do is they provide insight to managers, leaders, depending on the company and the position that you're in. That helps determine the direction of business decisions of the company in general, whether or not they should keep someone, productivity, there's all this kind of reporting and stuff that goes into data analysis. Data analysis is really, really broad. And there is a whole umbrella underneath the HR umbrella that's in data decision making and data analysis. So maybe you don't have to pick between one and the other. Maybe you marry the two and look at those types of roles. I think that's going to be a good option. Think about that and look into it and let me know if you've seen any positions like that or if you had an industry in mind and I can give you some more feedback that's more specific, if that helps. But yeah, so, for those of you in an administrative capacity right now, which I used to be in, I really think HR is such a broad spectrum of what's in there. A lot of people think that it's just filling out paperwork and sitting in an office, being that guy from the show, The Office, sitting there telling everybody what to do and what not to do. And yes, that can be your job, but it doesn't have to be your job. Like that's been my job. It's not been my job. I've kind of run the gamut of a lot of different roles. And so I feel like it's important for you to hear about each part, but for right now, what I'm telling people in administrative positions is a lot of these companies, they're trying to operate more lean. They're scaling back. People are still doing layoffs. It's not specific to any one industry who's doing layoffs and who's not, or any specific positions, I would say. And as the person who's had to inform people that they're being laid off and or fired, um, I won't say that HR is a safe space because there are a lot of companies that overhire in HR as well and have like these random HR positions where they do a very segmented group of work as a team that may not be as important to the entire company, but there's so many different things you can do in HR. You can pick something that makes you a little bit harder to fire, I should say. But one of the biggest things to me is money, right? I like money. I like taking PTO. I like taking trips. I just came back from the Bahamas last week, supposed to be in Jamaica at the end of the month. I like to make money and I also like to spend it. That's why I like to make more money because it is necessary for life. And no, money doesn't buy you happiness, but money does get you access to resources and things that then in turn can make you happy. Like travel makes me happy. And I like to give numbers to back things up sometimes. Like here in Atlanta, if you're an administrative assistant, that's not, any specific industry or anything. On average, you're going to get about 45, maybe up to 47,000 with 3 years experience, right? Now you can have 3 years of experience in HR and be an HR coordinator, which is another similar position, but is HR specific, and you can make 55 to about 58. Some even go up to 60, 65. So if you can have the same amount of experience and very similar skill set, my thing is why not just go the HR route? And to do that, it really just takes sort of knowing what your skill set is, knowing the value that you bring to a company, first of all, because your experience is valuable. Don't ever walk around saying, well, I'm just an administrative assistant. Your skill set is valuable and everyone cannot do your job. We know this. There are people who can't function with minor details. They can't function with the small details or what some people would call small details to carry things through to the end. So, admin assistants, executive assistants, patient access coordinators, which that's what my first real job was being a patient access coordinator. You have the type of experience that a company will really value if you want to shift into HR. And if you want to make more money, then I would suggest that you do it sooner than later because you can get in at a lot of these companies that are growing, or you can get in at a bigger company. And I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to be looking for when you are looking for jobs. So to backpedal a little bit, for those of you who are not familiar with how I got into HR, I started my career off working at a large hospital system here in Atlanta, and I was a patient access coordinator. And if you don't know what that is, that's the person who, when you go in, they're usually at like the front desk, or sometimes they work back of house staff. I was trained to do pretty much all the front and back end positions that were administrative within the hospital system because I was in the internal floating pool. So, people will bring in contractors to companies when they need additional help, or if someone's going to be out for maternity leave, things like that. My particular role, I was trained to do everything so that they didn't have to go outside and hire new people because somebody was always going out on maternity leave, or someone was always out sick, or someone was on a sabbatical. It could be anything, or just not showing up to work and then they're short. I'm the person who's going to show up and I can sit at your front desk. I know how to use all the systems at that hospital, and I would do the thing, right? And I made no money, and be very honest with you. When I left there after about 3 years, I think I was around $11 or so an hour, right? That was with my little pay increase that I'd received. So that $11 an hour, somewhere around there. Not great money, right? I lived at home. I worked all the time. It was a pretty stressful job. People would come in, throw fits, get angry. We just had an incident like that here in Atlanta, actually. Someone came in very upset, and that did not end well. But people come in and they're upset, and you're that frontline person. I got tired of that. I left and I went and worked for a cancer physician at a different hospital setting. So I worked directly for one position. I didn't have to sit at the front anymore. So it was a very different job, but pretty much more of the same. I made a little bit more money, but I was driving like 45 minutes away even without traffic, just to get to that job. So, not making that much money, driving far to go work with someone who honestly was pretty much a jerk. And, it wasn't doing what I needed to do. I still had to live at home and I wasn't able to really flourish. I was just working to put gas in my car pretty much. And I started thinking that I really wanted to get a HR because I did a lot of training throughout those years. Whenever people would start, because I knew everything, I trained a lot of new hires. I partnered with people and they would shadow me because I did my job. I did it very well. And managers respected me. So I got a lot of experience in that and I wanted to work with our HR department. I tried to transition to our internal HR department at both hospital systems. It was never successful. I was never successful. You know why? Because those people never left those jobs. Like the people who were in HR when I started there decades ago, they are still there because there's so much movement you can have in HR. It's kind of hard to get bored, I would say, depending on where you work and what you do. So eventually I said, you know what? I can't keep doing this. It's drying me up. Life is boring. This job is boring. I want to go do something else and I want to make more money. Because at that point, I was still making less than 40,000. So I actually took an internship. I tried to get an entry level role in HR, but at the time, it was very, very tight, and I was only really looking at the hospital systems, which again, those people were not moving. So that was my mistake. I should have been looking broader and thinking bigger, but I wasn't because I didn't know what I know now. So long story short, I left and I got an internship working in HR, and that was with our state. And I was there about 10 months. And if things just took off from there, I landed a position with a tech company after that. I've worked at an accounting firm. I've worked several different places, a law firm, back to tech, biotech. I tried to kind of dip my toe in different industries so that I can get an idea of what I liked, what I didn't like, and then figure out what I wanted to do long term. So right now, I'm an HR compliance specialist at a biotech company. Did I think I was going to do that in the beginning? No, but it's great because I make more money than I ever thought I could make. My hours are decent. It's a flexible company. It's not like how everybody says, I want to go work at a tech company, right? Biotech's a little different. It's a lot more, well, I'll say a lot different, a lot more rules, regulations. They try to do things more so by the book, which is good for me right now and where I am in life. Because when you come from these tech companies where they just kind of make things up along the way, you look for a little bit of order and decency, and so that's what I have now, and that flexibility works for me, which is another reason why you should look into HR because that flexibility that you lack with some of these administrative roles, because you're typically someone's right hand person, you can get that working in HR. I barely have to talk to people at my job. I talk to people when they need me or when I need to correct something or if some paperwork comes in, if there needs to be an audit, my human interaction is somewhat limited, which works for me right now because for those of you who are not aware, I'm also a caregiver to my dad who has dementia. So I'm busy all day. Like right now, he's in there whistling. Y'all probably can't hear him. And I could be doing work, I could be get more coffee, but still being productive and making the money necessary for me to thrive and not just survive. Right. So I always go back to that because, like I said, I like to make money, but it costs money to live too. So I like to make as much as possible and exert as little energy as possible, if that makes sense. So, I have my little outline here because I will talk all day if you let me, right? So that's a little bit about my background, my story, how I got into HR. But I want to point out something. Everyone doesn't need to go back to school to get into HR. I want to be clear about that because I do have a couple people who've reached out about, maybe going back to get a master's in HR. You can do it. I did do it. I will say I did go back to school. I felt it was necessary for me at the time because, I mean, I can't even think of what year that was at this point. At the time, I kept hitting a wall. And so I needed to go back to get something to kind of push me ahead of people I was competing against. I also didn't have anything that I felt like made me stand out on my resume at the time. Again, if I knew then what I know now, things would have been a little different. I probably would have taken on less student loan debt. Is it more beneficial to have a master's? I won't say that it's more beneficial. It depends on the role. I'll say that. It depends on the role and it depends on if you if you have a bachelor's, what is your bachelor's in? Because it doesn't have to be related, but if it is, then maybe somebody will say, "Oh, okay." If it's not, it's still like, "Okay, well, you went back and you shifted." There's no I won't say there's a clear-cut answer. So your bachelor's is in business administration. Okay. So if you have a bachelor's in business administration, what I would do is instead of going back for a full-fledged master's degree right now, especially because the cost of school is stupid, unless you can get someone to pay for it or get your job to pay for it, I would maybe get a graduate certificate, which is the first thing I did. Because if you get a graduate certificate, you don't have to do all those frou-frou classes that kind of feel like a repeat of what you've already done. And you can instead dive right into the stuff that really matters. So I got my graduate certificate on the way of completing the master's. My bachelor's is in behavioral science, but it was from like a really small school that I felt like nobody cared about, which is dumb, but I felt like it was holding me back working where I or trying to work where I was trying to work at the time. Because people love being like, "Well, where'd you go to school?" I think that's the dumbest question ever. Because who cares? I'm 37, who cares where I went to school? I have the experience and I have the degree, and what do you need done? Because I'm here to solve your problem. So, but in your case, if you have a business administration bachelor's degree, then I would look at really good schools for a graduate certificate in HR if you want to go that route. And there are a couple different schools that have them, like Tulane, Central Michigan University. I think Cornell has one. A lot of the big state schools also offer these, and people sleep on the certificate programs. But the magic of those is they cost less, or you're going to spend less money overall, but you're focusing on those core classes. And if you pick a good program, you will get hands-on practical work. Like they make you do projects that actually touch on what you're going to be doing. It's not like you're just taking these arbitrary classes to come out with a piece of paper and you don't know what you're doing. So look at some of those schools. I said Tulane, Wake Forest, Central Michigan, and any of the state schools near you. And look into who will pay for it. If your job will pay for it, or if the school itself is offering any funds for people to go back to school and further their education, because I've seen that a good bit too. I would look into that. And then I want to add something else there. I say state schools because there are a lot of for-profit programs and schools out there offering master's programs, offering MBAs, come learn HR through our school. Schools pop up overnight and then they take thousands and thousands of dollars from students. And the next thing you know, they're going bankrupt. Several of them this has happened to. So I would highly advise against going to a for-profit school to get a master's or really any degree if you can help it. I would go local state schools, community college route where they are fully accredited where you are. So that way, if you're applying to jobs in your area, they're familiar with those schools. People do turn their noses up at certain things. I'm not saying I do, but it matters when you're trying to beat out the competition, right? So, like, honestly, that's part of the reason why I had gone back to school is because I felt like I needed an extra boost in trying to beat out the competition. It worked out for me, but if it hadn't, then I would have been looking crazy and in debt for no reason. So keep that in mind too. So, sometimes I have conversations with people and they talk about having a difficult time. Like you just said that you have a difficult time. That's crazy because, it really comes down to who's in charge and how smart are they, right? How smart are they? Do they understand, like how you've gone to an HBCU? Do they understand that HBCUs are servicing our communities and providing the same education that maybe some bigger football school? is providing. Unfortunately, some people in charge just don't connect the two. So they make it difficult. They make it difficult. And sometimes, I'm not saying you, and sometimes it's also combined with people not speaking to the skill set that they have that would make them a great candidate for a position. A lot of times it is about positioning yourself as a top candidate. And not everyone can do that, or not everyone knows the best way to do that, or even understands how their existing skill set ties into the role that they're trying to get, specifically with HR. And I made a list of a couple things that admins in particular, or people in administrative roles, have a lot of experience with and don't think about being HR skills, or potentially being HR skills invaluable to a company. So just from, record keeping. Record keeping is a huge compliance area. I work in compliance now, and record keeping is very, very important. We're going through a project as we speak at my company where we are going through, and I'm working with our global HR leaders to review anything we have saved and to purge the things that are supposed to be purged after a certain number of years. Making sure we have the things that we're supposed to have or keep them. So let's say, for instance, someone gets terminated. Depending on what state, or depending on what country you're in, you're supposed to keep, let's say, those records or employee records, especially like payroll records, for 3 to 7 years, depending on the country. Some places you have to keep it 10 years. No one's going back and looking at these things. So when companies are hiring for these types of roles, nobody wants to do those jobs. I won't say nobody, because I'm somebody who will do it. But a lot of people don't want to do those jobs. And therefore, those roles pay a good salary. They pay a great salary because someone has to do the job. Because if it's not done right, then companies are on the hook for thousands of dollars, depending on how egregious their oversight is. So I always tell people that record keeping and compliance, those will pay forever, because the government comes up with new rules every other day. And sometimes the rules don't make any sense, and no one knows how to implement, or no one wants to even start the conversation about how to implement those rules. So always look at record keeping and compliance, which is something that a lot of administrative professionals have experience in. Time off requests and calendar management. Don't sleep on that. Don't sleep on that at all, because managing people's time off, whether it's keeping up with how many hours they've, taken out of a certain bank amount of time that they have available for PTO or some other kind of leave, those things are important. Just managing time off requests and requests for leave in general is a whole nother thing that comes with a whole different set of paperwork that, again, a lot of people don't even want to have to deal with. I don't want to have to deal with it, which is why I don't do it anymore. Compliance audits, that kind of ties into what I mentioned at first. But I've worked with a lot of you who have had experience with different types of audits. It doesn't just have to be a compliance audit. Banking industry professionals, y'all do all kinds of audits. So if you can search for like that specific type of audit, or whatever compliance area you're accustomed to working with, and see what comes up, like especially on LinkedIn. You go, you type in, let's say, I don't know, I'm going to make up something and say deposit audits, banking regulations, right? You type that in and you see what comes up. Then you tap at the top where it says not job posts, but you pick um, job openings, not posts is what I'm going to say. You can look and see sort of what comes up in that arena. I guarantee you there's a job that is responsible for just doing that. Some of you have done I-9s. If you work in an actual office, and you could be an office coordinator, you could be front desk, and maybe you've been granted the task of verifying people's documents for being hired, and you go through and you do people's I-9s. Now, if you don't know what that is, I have a whole video about I-9s, especially if you're a notary. I talk about that. So there's a video up about that if you want to go look into it. But if you know how to handle an I-9, that is a whole thing in itself in HR. You fall under the umbrella of compliance, or you fall under onboarding and new hire management, right? Talking about expense management and budgeting. Depending on the structure of the company, you might fall under the HR department. I used to do the expenses for a previous tech company that I worked for instead of the accounting and finance team. Really weird, but I'm the one who set up the software, so I knew how to use it. I actually had to teach our accountant how to use the software. So if you have experience using tools like Concur or Expensify, things like that, or even Salesforce. I remember I did have to use the Salesforce expense management tool. You are marketable because people don't know how to use it properly. All right. Just general understanding of policies and procedures and how sort of getting those out, pushed out into a company when things are new. That's change management. That is part of HR. Just training, onboarding, credentialing is a big one. So I would say like credentialing, site access, and I'm gonna bring this up again too. Credentialing is a big one depending on the industry you're in. Um, my company has a whole credentialing department. We have a whole site access team, but then they still have me, the compliance specialist, because we all have to work together to get certain things done. Let's say an employee has to go work. I'm going to use an engineer specifically. Let's say we have an engineer who has to go work on site at a specific science lab or hospital. The three groups of us, we have to work together because that lab may say, hey, I need you to run a background check on this person, and we need a copy of it. Now, the people who work on my team, we already know we're not giving you a copy of anything. What we can do is verify that this person passed, failed, or otherwise, or just don't send them to your job site. But it's my job to go through and read those requests, read the policies of these companies, and make sure that they're not kind of overstepping their boundaries. And then I advise those other groups on how to proceed. I'm not the one actually conducting the background checks, but that has been part of my job in the past. So I'm kind of perfect for it, right? So if you have any role in onboarding employees, running background checks, credentialing, that type of thing, especially if you work in a hospital system, you definitely want to look into HR. And that kind of ties into equipment provisioning and electronic device provisioning. If you're the person who gets not laptop, but like iPads, laptops, phones, things like that for new hires, whether it's for physicians and they need like pagers, phones, all these things, that also falls under the umbrella of HR, or it can, depending on what industry you're working in. Same with that software license provisioning. You're a checks and balances person, and that is part of compliance. And that falls under HR. At least it has for my role. So you can kind of broaden what you're thinking about HR is, because there's a lot that you can do within that realm. And taking it back to the data analysis, if you're responsible for pulling any sort of reporting and providing feedback to managers, department leaders, the C suite, whoever it is, that data piece and being able to read, understand, and tell a story based on the data that you've pulled, that is priceless, because I have a very limited capacity when it comes to the data piece. Like I can pull some numbers, I can maybe make a short story if it's not too many moving parts. But once it starts getting too deep, I'm lost. And then that's when I call in my colleague, because he is brilliant and he can take a spreadsheet and turn it to anything that you need it to be. And that's why I'm doing some training on pivot tables right now. So think about that with that data analysis piece as well. And that, pretty much takes me into talking about the different specialties that you can focus on. Now, we just hit on what some of your key skills and experiences are, but let's talk about what you can do with those experiences, right? So, there are several different specialties underneath the umbrella of human resources. And human resources, especially recently, you'll see it listed as human resources or the people team or people operations. It's really all the same, right? It's kind of all the same, but different companies call it different things because they have a different company culture. So it might be the case that you'll see that used interchangeably. So when you're searching for roles, I always tell people don't just type in human resources jobs. You might want to type in people operations, people ops, people team, things like that, because you'll see more positions pop up if you go ahead and run all those searches, right? So you want to look at things like talent acquisition, if that's an interest of yours. We also have onboarding, which we touched on a bit, training and development, we touched on as well. I love onboarding and training and development. That used to be my favorite thing to do. Payroll and compensation. I've had to do payroll. I'm not a fan, but if you are good with numbers, spreadsheets, ensuring accuracy, even the data analysis piece, maybe you will consider looking at some of those payroll certifications as well, and kind of working your way up there, especially if you don't necessarily like people facing roles, you want to look into payroll and compensation because those roles they focus on not just running payroll, but those who are focused more so on the compensation and strategy side, they look at market pay rates and they work with managers, executive leadership, depending on what level you're at, to come up with plans to make sure people are being paid and compensated well and fairly. So that is a way to put your strategy hat on while still focusing on data and numbers and telling a story. And then we've got the people analytics, which I would tie back to the data analysis. So what about what certificate in HR? You spoke with me. So I think certificates in HR are great. A graduate certificate would be key, but if you're going to focus on data or you want to focus on data, I know that there are some actual certificates that are in HR but focus on people analytics. That's typically what you'll see. They won't necessarily call it data analysis, but they may call it people analytics. So I think you should look into those. You can get an overall HR certificate, but if you already know that you have a specific focus you want to nail in or focus in on, then I would go that route because honestly, specializing can earn you more money than being a generalist. I started as a generalist, and being a generalist is great because you sort of learn everything. Like you can throw me in almost any HR position, and I'm good. You need a benefits administrator, I can do that. You need a payroll person, I can do that too. Employee relations. It just depends on what you want to do next. So I always tell people before you invest in any additional learning or certificate, know what you want to do, or at least have a good idea about it. Look into what the salary will be. Look at the companies that you're interested in and see if that role is relevant right now. Um, and then kind of look deeper at what those jobs are asking for as far as experience and see if you can connect with someone in a similar role. I know it's kind of, people always say it's kind of played out right now, but ask for coffee chats. It doesn't have to be a coffee chat, especially if someone's working remotely, but just ask for 15 minutes of their time. A lot of people, especially now, due to a lot of layoffs, they're offering their time to talk to people and provide insight. So I would do that before you make the commitment. I think certificates in HR are great, but if you're going to pay for a certificate, again, you don't want it to be through a for-profit school or program. You want it to be from somewhere reputable where maybe the name does some of the speaking for you and will help you actually get ahead instead of just being something else on your resume, right? So I would look at it like that. Hope that helped. If not, let me know. But yeah, so with that people analytics piece, I think you can look into that specifically and find a program that focuses on that if you know that you want to fall into the line of data. Also, information systems for those of you who are, more tech savvy or you like the data and maintenance of data part of things, retrieving information, the HR information system space will be good for you. Policy development is good for those who are compliance mindset, but also write well, and like to do research. I've had to write policies, um, And I know that the impact on a business is great when you want to implement a new policy. For instance, I've worked with companies to implement unlimited paid time off, which that's a polar thing to offer at a company. But getting that policy written properly, it requires research skill, being able to look at other companies that are similar to the ones that you work for, look at the competitors, reach out, find out what they're doing, and then partnering with employment law attorneys and risk managers to actually get it written and get it done. Even if you're working from like a template, you want to be able to go in and iron out the verbiage so that it ties to the company culture of where you work, right? And then let me see, what else do we have here that you could do in those areas? We already talked about record keeping, benefits administration. That's one that I probably could easily fall into one day or fall back into. If you have worked as a patient access coordinator or a patient financial counselor like I have, then you are probably ahead of the game when it comes to working in benefits administration because you understand what a lot of working adults don't understand. You understand deductibles, co-payments, co-insurance, out-of-pocket max, right? Those types of things. You understand what those are, what they mean, how you use those together, that sort of thing. You would be ahead of the game if you chose to use that experience and move into HR because you could slide right on in there and talk about how you verified, patient benefits and explained benefits or walk through explanation of benefits documents with patients and with doctors, things of that nature. You may have a fair understanding of medical terminology and maybe even some medical coding. So I think that's a great space for you all who are working in the hospital system or have worked in the hospital system to segue into. Even the admins, the physician admins, like I used to be as well, y'all have a wealth of knowledge. The software that we use in those positions, why don't you look at those companies and see if you can segue into it that way? You can probably get a decent shot if you look at companies that are tied to what you're already doing. All right. And then you have health and wellness and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Health and wellness, that's never been my particular space. But I did used to have a colleague where we split our duties and I did more so like benefits, onboarding, that sort of thing. And she did the stuff after the employee was in and settled, health and wellness. She would host, like yoga sessions and stuff like that. And do surveys and reach out to people about their stress levels. There's tons that you can do in that space. You just have to find the right company that truly values that sort of thing. A lot of companies do value it now, but I've seen that they outsource a lot of that. But if you can find a position, they do pay well from what I've seen. Diversity, equity, inclusion. This is not to offend anybody who works in that space. I personally have avoided jobs that have a bullet point listed, especially these generalist roles that have a bullet point listed where it says, you'll be our person to handle our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. Because to me, that is a space all in itself. It is more than a bullet. So when people are transitioning and they ask me about different jobs in the HR space, or if they send me a link to a position they're interested in and they want to know my opinion about it, if I see a bullet on there that says diversity, equity, and inclusion or DEI strategy, I will point that out to them and let them know that they need to go look at that again because what happens or what I have seen happen and what I've experienced myself is sometimes these employers, they don't want to invest the money where it needs to be invested. And instead they make it a task or a checkbox for the person in the HR seat. And that's not for me, right? Because if there's no real strategy already in place, then I like to suggest that companies bring in people who specialize in the DEI space and don't just give it to me as a project because I don't know what to do with that. I always jokingly say, I'm not a DEI strategist. I'm just a girl who happens to be Black and works in HR, right? So don't ask me how to develop new strategies to help you diversify your team because I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. We live in Atlanta. It's diverse. I don't know what to tell you. So I just tell people to keep that in mind and always look out for that little bullet point. Also, always look out for the little bullet point where they try to stick in payroll, or if they stick in that you report to finance. That is something that I have done in the past. I've reported to a CFO. I have seen it fail miserably because they don't always know what they need to know. And you're going to want to work somewhere where you have someone who can mentor you in house and show you the ropes in house, or at least grant you a budget to connect you to a mentor of some sort. Or you can do like what I've done in the past, and I found my own mentor and just paid out of pocket because I was like, I will not fail. I refuse to fail because I didn't have the proper support. So, those are just kind of little tips as you're looking for positions. Don't ignore those little bullets at the end that they try to slide in because they're big projects. And also, don't get tripped up on these HR job titles. Everyone's not meant to be an HR manager. Everyone's not meant to be an HR director. I have been both. Okay. So, when you're looking at jobs, one thing that people have communicated to me is I'm not looking at anything that has coordinator in the title or specialist in the title because that's entry level. Again, don't let that fool you because there are coordinators making 150,000 a year, okay? There are specialists clearing six figures, okay? I'm an HR compliance specialist, and I will say I make more money than I did as an HR director. I make about 25% more than I did as an HR director, okay? You do not have to have director in your title to make money. And honestly, a lot of people aren't built for director life anyway. I did it. I came, I saw, I conquered. I don't necessarily have to ever do it again. I also don't ever want to manage anyone again. So that's sort of why. But don't let the titles trip you up. Now, what you do need to consider is how does your title translate outside of the company you're in? But as long as you understand the scope of your work, and if you uh, can effectively communicate the scope of your work on your resume and in interviews and in written communications, people shouldn't be confused by saying, oh, well, they're just a coordinator. Yes, there are entry level coordinators and there are high level coordinators, right? So you want to make sure that you look at the actual duties of the job and find out about the compensation range before you dismiss a potential position just because it has coordinator or specialist in the title. So I want to emphasize that because you will miss out on money if you do so. And so, kind of considering all of those things and talking about the skills that you already have that can make you a great candidate in HR, I want to point out three that I think are easy areas for you to transition into. That training and development, that can be a moneymaker for a lot of you because a lot of you are training people daily and not being compensated fairly for it. That onboarding piece I mentioned, that credentialing slash site access or license provisioning, I think those are some of the easiest to transition into because you don't have to know all of the things to do them. Mock interviews, yes. So I do offer mock interviews. I used to offer them as, kind of a standalone service. But what I found was people benefit from them more if we do sort of an all-inclusive package. So if you're interested in a mock interview service, you want to look at my one-on-one um, the one-on-one hybrid service where it's us working together, talking, we're going through your resume, I'm combing through, asking questions to make sure that we're fine-tuning that resume as we go. We meet live for about 90 minutes. And if you book that service, not only do you get, a revamped resume plus that live time where we're doing some real digging into your experience, but you also get my cover letter template. I also work on your LinkedIn about statement. I zhuzh that up for you and tell you exactly what you need to do to improve your profile from your headline to your LinkedIn about, and then the rest of it, I kind of tell you exactly what you need to do. And then as add-ons, that's the only way you can get the interview support, because supporting people without understanding exactly what they're trying to do, um, and what their resume has already, and going through that conversation piece for those 90 minutes, it's not as helpful. I used to do it, but I just didn't find it as helpful. Now I have resources I can send via email that will be helpful. That's not necessarily a live service, but if you need resources that are some pre-recorded videos, some resources I can point you to, that I can send. But if you want that mock interview, that hands-on support, then you want to look at that one-on-one service. All right. And, to add, or kind of where it relates to that interview piece, as well as kind of how we present ourselves when it comes to our skill set, the soft skills, right? The soft skills, those have to match what we say in the interviews. And so I like to tell people the things that other people may not tell you, the things that you need to have in your skill toolbox to succeed in HR. And the main thing I would say is you need to have the ability to influence or manipulate. Manipulate sounds harsh, but you need to be able to influence people in order to get them to go the way you need them to go, like when it comes to that change management and things like that. Is the one-on-one a one-time deal? How long is the service for? So the one-on-one is a one-time thing, but when you walk through it, that's also the only way you can get to add on like additional time. If someone wants to come back and work with me, just like having conversation, working through things that they're experiencing either through interviews, if they keep hitting a wall, then you can always add on one more time. But the overall revamp is going to be like a one-time thing. And let me send you the link to it, so you can have it in the chat, so you can navigate to it easy. So this is the link to all of the services for a job seeker, but also if you yeah, actually I'm going to send you that because then you can see everything. If you scroll down, it says, "What's your preference?" And because I've taken down some of my services, brought them back, taken them down again, just kind of based on the market and what people seem to benefit most from or what people gravitate towards. So the four things you see there are what's available right now. If you need, let's say, a custom service or you want support that you don't see listed here, you can shoot me an email, and I will get back to you. Let me send you my email address just in case you don't have it. Tiffany at pitchr.com. But yeah, take a look at that and let me know. And it's fluid. These are my go-to services, but sometimes people have more questions and need to figure out exactly what will work for them. You also can set up a free 15-minute consultation call. So we can chat, you can tell me what you're thinking or explain to me what you're needing support in, and then we can figure out what you need best. You're welcome. Yeah. So, HR in itself, I try to give people the information they need, the nitty-gritty, right? Less of the fluffy. I'm not so fluffy when it comes to telling people what they need to do, what they need, the support that will work best for them. Just like I'm not going to give you the fluffy things you need to know to work in HR. I'm not going to say, oh, you need to be a good communicator. Yes, absolutely. You need to have good communication skills, um, a good communication style that will help you thrive in a corporate work environment if that's where you're going to be. If you're going to work in a doctor's office, or if you're going to work for a healthcare system, you need to be able to navigate spaces and communicate to people so that they're not just offended right off the bat. Um, but again, I'll say you need to be able to influence and or manipulate. And when I say manipulate, I don't mean that in an evil way, but essentially working in certain industries, you do have to manipulate people. You have to manipulate people into thinking that ideas were their own in meetings. That is something that you will come across. You have to influence others into, so that you can get buy in for new ideas. So, absolutely, ability to influence and manipulate are top of the list, is what I would say. That's what I've learned in all, 10 years I've been in HR now, especially working in the tech space and working for law firms. Oh, baby, you have got to play the game, right? So, influence over others to get decisions made in your favor. You must learn that. You must also learn patience if you do not have it. Now, I am not the most patient person, but there will be times when you land your HR role where you will need something from a manager, a director. Maybe you need a job description so that you can post a position. Maybe you need answers to a question. They will drag their feet because one thing that has been consistent is everywhere I work, the managers, the directors, the department leaders, the C suite, whoever it may be, they think that what they have to do will always be more important than what you've asked them to do. Case in point, open enrollment. How many of you have taken your sweet time submitting your enrollment benefits, right? You may have a whole month to do it. Your HR person may have come and personally reminded you that you need to make your benefit selections, but you still snooze that email because you got to send other emails. You got to do this and you got to do that. So it's not important to you. It becomes important to you when you get that final email that says you will be uncovered until next year. Thanks and have a great day, right? That's when people tend to respond, is when they understand what they're about to miss out on. So, patience is a virtue, one that I struggle with, but patience is a virtue, but you need to have it if you're going to work in HR. Managers and your peers alike will drive you crazy if you don't learn patience. And related to that is a CYA mindset. That's what I'm going to call it. The CYA mindset is the cover your ass mindset. Okay. Once you work in HR, especially depending on what specialty you're going to focus on, you are going to see some things, experience some things, hear some things. People will say some things. And what you need to understand is that if it didn't happen in writing, it didn't happen. Point blank, period. Now, that's not true if someone says or has an allegation about, something inappropriate that's happened at work. But as far as covering your personal ass at work, if a manager has asked you to do something, if a director has asked you to do something, if a COO or a CEO has asked you to do something, here's the key, okay? You can meet with Bob, and Bob can say, "Hey, Tiffany, can you go ahead and tell John that he can have the 3 days off next week," right? Whatever. And then you let John have the 3 days off. Shit hits the fan while John is out of work. Somebody says, "Well, who told John he could be off?" John's going to say, "Well, Tiffany told me I could be off." I'm going to say, "Well, Bob told me I could tell him he could be." Bob's going to say, "I didn't say that. I just said that he was asking for the day off." Who's right and who's wrong? When in doubt, know that HR will always be the scapegoat. Okay. Depending on the company, the structure, the industry, when there's nowhere else to point, they will point at you. So you have to safeguard yourself. And in that scenario that I just gave about Bob and John needing that time off from work, Bob could have told me that verbally. What you have to do, and what used to piss people off that I would do, is I would go back to my desk and I would make a note to myself, okay, tell John can be off work for 3 days. I will email Bob and say, "Hey, Bob, thanks so much for your time earlier. Just to recap our meeting or our discussion, I'm going to let John know he can be off those 3 days per your confirmation." And then that's that. Now it's up to Bob to reply and say, "Oh no, I don't really want him to be off. Can you hold off on doing that?" Or it's up to Bob to say, "Thanks so much, Tiffany," right? But that right there, that was my record that Bob told me to tell John he could be off work those 3 days. That is a lesson that I cannot drill into your heads more. Okay. You have to learn how to CYA. Doesn't matter what it is. Don't matter if they said pick red balloons instead of blue balloons for a party. You need to CYA. And whether it's a weekly summary of here's the things we went over this week, here's what I've done, not done, you need to CYA because people will undoubtedly throw you under the bus at some point. Just saying. Not saying, but I'm just saying. Okay. Emotional intelligence is going to be vital. So pair that patience with that emotional intelligence, put that together, and you'll be all right. But if you cannot manage your emotions, and if you take everything personally, or as a personal attack when someone goes against your will or does something that you've advised them not to do, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Okay. And when you pair that with the CYA, I'll tell you right now, I have told C suite executives to do A. They have fought me on doing A for months. Someone else can come in and say, hey, we should do A. And then that same person will say, oh my gosh, we should have done this a long time ago. Well, Tiffany, how come we didn't talk about this? Don't take it as a personal attack. Okay. They don't listen. Sometimes people don't listen. It may be you, it may be them. You can always take a breather and say, actually, we did discuss this. Here are the emails where I sent it to you. You want to go back over and make sure, we're on the same page about what this person's saying and what I advise. We may be having the same idea, or we may have the same idea right now. That's because I'm a little petty. I do it that way. But you just want to make sure you have your emotional intelligence and can process things and understand that when someone's telling you something or they go against your will or take your idea, don't take it personally. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. Do your job, get it done, keep your scorecard. And so when you're ready to move on to the next job, you can remind yourself of why you're leaving, okay? Um keep your mouth closed. I'm going to say that. Keep your mouth closed. And paired with keeping your mouth closed, you need to know that you can't just like be friends with everybody at the office. So if you're the person who's like, oh, I'm so friendly, I want to be friends with everybody, talk at the coffee machine. I'm going to tell you right now, depending on what area of HR you work in, you're going to want to learn to keep a little bit of distance from team members. You're going to want to keep a little bit of distance. I have personally, I'm not going to say I haven't been the victim of anything, but I have personally been, what I feel like being disrespected. Someone thought that I was going to tell a person being terminated that they were being terminated. So they didn't tell me. My own HR team did not tell me that a person was being terminated, who I communicated with on a daily basis because they felt like I wouldn't be able to handle that professionally. Made no sense because I have had to terminate tons of people before. Me and the person were cool. We were work friends, right? But to me, it's just not that deep. I can terminate whoever I need to terminate because that's my job. I can connect with them after the fact and try to help them find a new job, but I would never cross the lines of confidentiality, um, and ethics and integrity. So just make sure you learn how to keep your mouth closed and keep your distance when it's necessary. And the last thing I'll say that you need, a skill that people sometimes fail to mention that you need in HR is you need to be emotionally intelligent, yes, but you need to be bold enough and brave enough to say no while being tactful. You need to be able to tell someone in a room or a group of people in a room if they're sharing ideas and you think those ideas are terrible and they're terrible. You don't want to just say your idea is terrible because you don't want to be the person who's just negative and other people have ideas and you poop on them. But you do want to learn and get comfortable with saying, hey, since we're all throwing out ideas, I hear what you're saying. Let me give you another option to consider. That's my way of saying your ideas are all stupid. Let's listen to mine. No, I'm just kidding. But you do want to be able to tell people no. That is, especially if you're in a smaller company where you work closer with the C-suite. I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell an executive their idea was either, less than stellar or it wouldn't work, or flat out say it was illegal what they were asking me to do, or illegal what they were doing, or unlawful, right? You have to be able to open your mouth and tell people that because tying it back to what I said about being the scapegoat, if something goes wrong and you never said anything, even if the decision wasn't yours, they can come back to you and be like, well, why didn't you know this? Why didn't you say? So you want to be able to um, show that you're a strategic partner, no matter what area of HR you work in, and open your mouth and tell people if their idea is good or bad. Okay. And with all of this, what I will say is depending on, or no matter what area of HR you want to work in, you really have to think about how you want to reposition your skills and experience before you take the leap and start applying. Okay. You want to think about the best way to shine light on your transferable skills. You want to think about your LinkedIn and what it says about you. Does it communicate that you want to stay in the job you're in now? Because if that's the case, you're going to keep getting, those types of jobs, or you're going to keep getting recruiters reaching out to you about those types of jobs. There's a way for you to reposition your experience and your skill set so that it shines and shines brightly to a recruiter who would be looking for someone with your skill set. So, with that being said, if you need help, I do offer help when it comes to your resume, right? Your LinkedIn, your presentation when it comes to interviewing and how to answer those questions like, tell me about yourself, so that you're answering it in a way that makes sense and that shows why you showed up to that interview in the first place or why you applied to that job in the first place. So you really want to focus on that. Know what you've been doing, define what you no longer want to do, think about what you want to focus on moving forward. And then from there, we can put together and tell your story and highlight the skills and experience that will make you a top candidate for a position in HR. I'm going to drop in the link in the chat here, another offering. Like if you don't necessarily want to do, a live one-on-one session, or you're not ready to just fully rewrite your resume yet, because it is a financial commitment. Although I do have flexible payment options available where you can break it up if you use PayPal. You want to take a look at the resume bundle. It's a template bundle that I created. I created a resume that is written from the perspective of an admin professional moving into an HR role. So it's perfect for someone who wants to be an HR coordinator or even an early career HR generalist. The key thing I want you to understand is the template itself is fully customizable. It's a Word document. So even if you want to work in a different industry or you want to specialize, that resume has actual bullet points I've written in there, and it has a professional summary in there that is written and can be fully customized by you. And it lends itself to being updated to focus on whatever it is that you want it to focus on. I've also included my LinkedIn checklist, and that checklist, I really need to find a better word for it besides checklist. It's not just a checklist. It has sample verbiage in there. Once again, it tells you exactly how to go through and update your LinkedIn profile, sample verbiage, how to handle your headline. It is 10 times better than a checklist, but for lack of a better word, I call it a checklist. I also have my cover letter template in there, fully customizable once again. So if you want to try to, take your hand um, at updating your resume yourself and filling in your experience with the type of information that I have in there, please take a look at that bundle. It is very, very affordable. Everything that I offer, I try to make as affordable as possible, right? So take a look at the bundle. Let me know if you have questions about it. On the other hand, if you want to, let's say maybe you're someone who likes to learn on your own and you need help with learning how to create a powerful resume, then I have a course called Winning 6 to 10 that I finally finished. And it is live, it is out there. That's also available via my website, pitchr.com. Winning 6 to 10 is only an hour long, right? But it is me walking you through writing what I like to consider the perfect resume, but I don't call it that. It's winning 6 to 10, write a better resume. And you get the resume template in the course for free. So let me point out a price difference right there. The template bundle right now is $22. That is as of today, June 19th. That doesn't mean that's going to be the price tomorrow or next week. But right now it's $22. Or you can take the course for $17 right now and get the same resume. I don't think it has all the other stuff in it, but you get the resume and I walk you through all the other stuff in an hour. So you can save money by taking the course for 1 hour, and it is me walking you through, showing you exactly what you need to do to write a strong resume. I show you my tools, I show you my tips, my tricks, all of the above. So you can do that for 17, or you can just jump straight into the bundle if you want for 22. I, of course, would recommend taking the course. If you're interested in the course, it is also on my website, but I will drop the link here for you as well. Again, it is winning 6 to 10, write a better resume. I don't think you will regret it because it's my course. Maybe I'm a little biased. But I do also offer your traditional resume rewrites and the one-on-one hybrid service. The traditional resume rewrite, I call that my facelift. That is, your typical, you send in your resume, there's a form you fill out, you send in a position that you're interested in applying to. I work my magic and I send you back your draft. That usually takes somewhere between like 10 and 15 days, or 7 to 10 business days. Sort of depends on how busy things are. And then that one on one hybrid service, we spend 90 minutes working together live. That's the live collaboration. That one, that's for someone who wants to have more of a one-on-one connection, and we're sitting like this face to face, and I'm going through your resume. Before we even meet, I have already changed the formatting of your resume, and we are discussing what you want to do. I'm providing feedback. I'm making live updates right then and there. I'm putting in notes if there's something that you need to go back and research and fill in the blank. And it is, to me, one of the best values you can get, because that's the only way to work with me live. The other services, it is purely email support. If you want to talk to me live for an extended period of time, ask your questions, get guidance. I don't call myself a coach because I'm not a coach. I have no coaching certification, but I am someone who has the skills and experience that you're looking to utilize. I've been in the jobs that you want to do. So if you want to, what I think, have the best coach you can possibly have, here I am. Okay. So it's all about what level of support you want, though. You can go to pitchr.com, check out the services under the link that says job seeker, and then we can go from there. You can always set up that free consultation call, and we can discuss those last 15 minutes. And again, they are free. Those are offered on Monday mornings as of right now. That is the only time that is available. And other than that, I'm just here to answer your questions. Did you have any other questions for me? Because I'd love to answer it while we're here. Okay. Well, I'm going to assume that I have answered all your questions for now. Um, as far as I can tell, I have not fumbled too badly on this live thing. So I may do these more often versus posting like a static video, or going live on Instagram, because I struggle with the Instagram live. I kind of hate it. Don't tell them I said that. So I think I like this better. I'm going to do this more often. Um, Probably going to do a notary one next. For those of you who are notaries, and haven't checked out my notary guide, go check that out. That is only $7, and I typically answer most of your questions. And outside of that, I may set up one of these lives so that if you are a notary and you've been having questions about that, you can find me here as well. But I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you asking your questions. If you have any other questions, you can find me on my Instagram, which is at pitch.hr, or you can send me a message through my website, pitchr.com, or you can drop a comment below and I will get back to you. All right. So thank you so much. Happy Monday. Hope you have a great rest of the week. Bye.